Sisters and brothers, hello. My name is Tim Harvey, and this year I again have the privilege of serving as the table coordinator for our annual conference this summer in Greensboro, North Carolina. If you're watching this video, then it means that you have agreed to be a table facilitator for either our delegate tables or this summer for one of our non-delegate tables. Thank you for your willingness to be part of our work at the annual conference this summer. We trust that your important contribution to our conversations will make our work at Compelling Vision successful and compelling and substantive this year. So again, thank you for your willingness to be a part. We started with tables at annual conference in 2012 in St. Louis, simply because we felt that we had moved to an unhealthy place in our conversations at annual conference, where people were not interacting with one another around the issues, but simply coming to make speeches and perhaps characterize or mischaracterize people with whom they disagreed, but without actually having to talk with one another about different perspectives on the challenges and the opportunities we face together as a church. We recognize as leaders in the church that civility is an important part of our life together. It's a value that I think probably we all agree is in increasingly short supply in our conversations across a whole number of issues in our culture. But we understand in the church that the way that we love one another, the way that we interact with one another, is in fact a commentary on our love for Jesus Christ, our Lord. We think the tables are a great way to help love one another, even as we discuss and disagree with the issues of the day. I want to take a minute and just describe the mechanics of the table arrangements. You were chosen because your district executive thought that you would be someone who was good for this role. We really rely on our district executives to help us with this. And then there are a couple of us in the annual conference office who have the privilege of knowing a great number of people around our denomination. And we go down through the list and add to the district executive's recommendations some people that we think will be gifted in this role. And so that's how you were selected. One of the jobs I will have in May and June of this year is to take the list of delegate and non-delegate attendees at annual conference and arrange them at the tables. We try to make sure that there is no district duplication at each table. We try to make sure that there is no more than one standing committee member at any given table. We try to have as even as possible gender distribution at each table. Sometimes people ask about husbands and wives, and unless there is a very compelling reason, we do not place husbands and wives at the same table, simply because we feel that that probably means that there would be one voice out of those two persons and not two. So those are some of the mechanics of the tables. But I always enjoy telling some of the neat stories that come from our tables. This story comes from annual conference 2 or 3 years ago. I was reading down through the evaluation forms, and a woman at one of the tables talked about a relationship and a friendship that she had formed with another sister at that table. The other person, the one who was not telling the story on the evaluation form, had some mobility issues. And that year, our moderator was asking us to indicate our votes by standing. And it wasn't easy for this other person to stand. Well, this person on their evaluation form writes that on one particular issue, these two women were going to vote opposite of one another. But the woman with the mobility challenge could not easily stand. So the woman filling out the evaluation form says, when it came time to vote, I stood up when it was time to vote yes. And because my sister in Christ, my new friend, could not easily stand, when it came time to vote no, I stood up and voted no in her place. Now, Robert's Rules of Order probably don't really appreciate that kind of thing. But I think in the church, that story speaks volumes, that we value making sure that everyone's voice is heard. And that is a relationship that if we weren't sitting at tables, probably never happens. Maybe those two sisters never even meet. And for me, situations and stories and relationships like that make all of the work that goes into tables, which is really not that much and not that difficult, but it does make it all worthwhile. So, as I've already said, thank you for your willingness to be a part of our annual conference in this way. I want to take a few minutes and talk specifically about this summer's annual conference. You well know that this year at annual conference, the format of business will be very different in that almost all of our business is given over to the compelling vision process. There are no queries to discuss at annual conference this summer, and the only business that we will have is our annual ballot and then the agency report and the items that they need to get done according to their constitutions and bylaws. And so we will have that, but nothing else. This year at annual conference, there is also the option for non-delegates to elect to sit at a table with a table facilitator. They will make that choice when they register for annual conference. We are asking those non-delegates to commit to being at that table for the entire conference and participate in the conversations that way. There basically won't be any difference in the experience between the delegate tables and the non-delegate tables, with the exception that the non-delegates, of course, will not be able to vote. Now, I'm guessing that a number of you will have questions about the flow of the compelling vision process and how that will work at the tables. And by and large, that's not going to be the purpose of this video. What I can say are a couple of things. First, be sure that you watch the delegate briefing video. I have included the link to that in the notes to this video. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also find it at the annual conference website. I would say specifically pay attention to the section of the video that starts at 8 minutes, which describes the love feast that we will have at annual conference this year, and the section of the video that starts at 11 minutes, which describes how the compelling vision process will be handled during our business sessions. There will be some electronics at the table, some chances for persons to indicate their preferences or the results of their work together on an iPad. I will also say that be sure to come to the on-site training. At the time of recording this video, I don't know where in the convention center that will be, but you probably will have already received a letter from me that will outline that information. At the on-site training, someone from the compelling vision process team will be there to describe in more detail some of these details of the flow of the compelling vision process. So be alert for those opportunities. Another question that came up after last year's annual conference was, would delegates be temporarily asked to move to another table for part of the process this year? And again, as far as I know, at the time when I'm filming this video, that final decision has not been made. The compelling vision process team feels that there is value in that, but they also recognize that that was not very popular with the delegates last year. So all I can say on that point, if you were wondering about that, is simply to wait and see. So with that information about the specifics of this year's conference, let me now turn to just some general instructions about being a table facilitator. The table facilitator packet, which again, if you've not already received, you will soon, will contain a lot of specific instructions that are unique to this conference. Take a look at that. Again, come to the on-site training. We'll answer any questions that we have then. People always come to those with a lot of questions. Every year, I think that maybe this year we've done it enough times and we have enough repeat table facilitators that we won't need the whole hour of on-site training. And every year, people come with excellent questions just so that they can be prepared for this job. And we always take the whole hour. And I'm happy to do that again this summer in Greensboro. This summer on Thursday morning at the annual conference, we will spend 35 minutes on table formation. We've done that every year. And that's a chance for the delegates at the table to get to know one another. Those questions that we'll use at the get to know you time will be included in the table facilitator packet. In general, I would say your job is to get there early on the first morning, be prepared, to remember that your job is to facilitate the conversation, not dominate or control the conversation. So you need to do things like make sure that people who don't talk or aren't talking much do contribute. Call on those people from time to time and ask them, what, sister, brother, what is your opinion? You would also need to do things if you have someone like me at your table who tends to talk too much at situations like that a gentle word to allow space for some others to speak will probably be helpful at some point in your work together. I would encourage you to have fun, to be at ease, to enjoy being with new friends with whom you share a common spiritual heritage. Dig down deeply into our work together. Well, if you remember a few minutes ago, I shared one of my favorite positive stories. I also want to share one of the common concerns that we hear from the tables. And there are two of those. The first is that we sometimes hear that my facilitator talked too much. So I just want to urge you in this video to monitor how much you are talking at the table. Again, it's not your job to control or dominate or anything like that. You are to facilitate conversation. Now, that does not mean that you are not allowed to have an opinion or to voice an opinion. You are. But just keep a check on your own contributions to the table and just kind of monitor that. The other concern that we have is one that happens maybe every other year or so. I'll hear from a participant at a table who felt singled out, that they were the only progressive voice at the table, or they were the only conservative voice at the table. We have a couple of times reseated table delegates to another table because of that. I've always been at a loss in that situation to know exactly how to proceed. I've never been at the table, so I've not heard the conversations. I can only take the person's word for it. We try to do the best we can. All I can say to you is to just be aware of how people are interacting, maybe how people are feeling, and try to make everyone feel as welcome as you can. If there is a problem that you know of, come find me. My cell phone number will be available. You can send me a text. I don't know where I'll be seated in the room this year, but I usually find a spot up near the front and kind of camp out there. I will try to help in whatever way that I can, either facilitating some conversation myself or finding someone who perhaps even has some better skills to help navigate these little bumps in the road that do sometimes happen. So feel free to call me, contact me anytime if the situation arises. Well, sisters and brothers, I think that's all for the table training video. The job is not hard. Many of you have done this before. It's often been great fun and overwhelmingly a positive experience. A few little hiccups along the way notwithstanding. Thank you for your willingness to be in this role, and I look forward to seeing you at annual conference this summer.